Today we're going to talk about 2 Timothy verses 14 through 18. There's a whole bunch of application in here, and we could take this many different ways. But I'm going to zero in right where Paul starts us off in verse 14. He ends by saying, "Stop fighting over words. Such arguments are useless, and they can ruin those who hear them." Christianity, we do it so many different ways. In fact, I was going to look up how many different Christian denominations or religions or divisions or whatever you want to call them there are. And I had so much trouble, it was ridiculous. I couldn't put a hard number on it. The lowest number I found, believe it or not, was 6. There's 6 main divisions in Christianity. The highest number I found was in the tens of thousands, well over 30,000 different ways to do Christianity. That's nuts. There's one God, one Jesus. Why do we need so many different divisions in Christianity? Why do we do that? And that's what I want to talk about today. There's just so many differences in us, and we always like to focus on the differences. We think that I've got it figured out, you're doing it wrong, or I don't like that about your beliefs, so I'm going to form a new one and go this way. And all that does is dilute Christianity and weaken it. And why I want to talk about this today isn't because of the effect it has on us. It's the effect it has on people who aren't introduced to Jesus yet, aren't introduced to God yet. They don't believe any of this stuff, but yet they see us arguing about theological points, maybe beliefs, interpretations, and they say, hey man, these guys don't even know what they believe. Why would I want anything to do with that? And you might think I'm just thinking of a hypothetical example, but I'm not. This is, as chaplains, Jason and I talk to a lot of people, and you wouldn't believe how often people say that, how can I believe in something that you guys argue about all the time? And I want to bring it back to the verses here in verse 15 that says, "Who correctly explains the word of truth?" All of Christianity, all these different divisions, they all come back to a word of truth, right? The word of truth is the gospel. And the gospel is pretty simple. The gospel is that there's a God that created everything. He even created you and me. We're born into sin. We need to solve that problem, but we can't do it. But God could. So God sent His only Son to live a sinless life and die in our place on a cross as full payment for our sins. And not only that, He rose from the dead, conquering death, so that you and I might be able to share eternity with God in heaven. And how might we be able to do that? By believing, surrendering to the Son of God, Jesus, that He did die for our sins and conquer death, and that we are saved by God's grace through that belief or faith. That's the gospel. Beyond that, anything else is just something to talk about. And we love to just take that and dissect it and understand it, interpret it a little different than somebody else, and discuss it. And you know what? There is a place for all that. But I'm just saying, be careful where we do that. Because our beliefs, the further they get away, or the further they taint the gospel, they can turn people away from Jesus. And that is, as Christians, is the opposite of what we're supposed to be doing. And Paul states that in verse 18, where he's talking about these two guys who claim something happened that didn't, and they turn people away from the faith. And every day, Christians, good, well-meaning Christians, turn people away from the faith by the way they act and the arguing they do over things. And I just wanted to point that out and see what we can do to resolve that. I mean, obviously everybody has their firm convicted beliefs, but the more we can stop the Civil War and act like a united army for God, the more effective we're going to be in spreading the gospel to the ends of the earth. So I just encourage you to maybe, I don't want to say bury the hatchet, because that's a little dramatic. But reach out to another Christian who might be of another church or denomination from you, and man, find out what you got in common and see how you can work together to spread the gospel. We look forward to seeing you next week. It's a couple off weeks in the IndyCar season before we get to the season closer. So if you could just pray for the people while they're at home, the people of IndyCar, that they just might get some rest and recharging before we go into the finish. We'll talk to you next week.